Say, I've seen it. Equally intolerable are the people who study Zen and come out and brag to their friends about how much their legs hurt and how long they sat and what an awful thing it was. They're sickening. Because the discipline side of this thing is not meant to be something awful. It's not done in a masochistic spirit or a sadistic spirit. Suffering builds character. Therefore, suffering is good for you. To a student. Now, I want to hear you. I want to hear you say the word move and really mean it. Because I want to hear not just the sound, but the person who says it. Now produce for me that. He goes, move! And the Zen teacher says, no, no, not yet. Move! And he says, he goes, move! And the Zen teacher says, no, no, not yet. Move! And he goes, move! And the Zen teacher says, no, no, not yet. Move! Move! The Zen teacher says, no, no, not yet. Move! And it goes, move! The Zen teacher says, no, no, not yet. Move! And it says, it goes, move! The Zen teacher says, no, no, not yet. Move! And it says, it goes, move! The Zen teacher says, no, no, not yet. Move! And it says, it goes, move! And the Zen teacher says, no, no, not yet. Move! And it says, it's only, it goes, move! And the Zen teacher says, no, no, not yet. Move! And it's move! The Zen teacher says, no, no, not yet. Move! And it says, it's move! The Zen teacher says, no, no, not yet. Move! And it says, move! The Zen teacher says, no, no, not yet. Move! And it says, move! The Zen teacher says, no, no, not yet. Move! And it says, it's only coming. Move! The Zen teacher says, no, no, not yet. Move! And it says, move! The Zen teacher says, no, no, not yet. Move! And it says, move! The Zen teacher says, no, no, not yet. Move!
I've done a lot of acid. I've done at least 400 hits of acid. And I know that because over about a 4-year period. And I know that because while I was doing it, I was sort of keeping track. And I say not lightly, acid is very much a part of why I am who I am. Acid is very much a reason that my brain works the way it does. And this is the story of my bad trip that I had. So, the first time I ever did acid, I bluffed myself into it. After my freshman year of college, I went to New York University, and then I came back to Tennessee, where I'm from, very small town in Tennessee, where I really only had 2 friends. And when I came back, they said they had discovered acid their freshman year. And they said, "Have you done acid, man?" And I was big New York big shot, and I didn't want to admit, no, of course I haven't done acid. And so I said, yeah, acid's great. I love acid. And they said, good. Pop, 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 pop. Let's do some right now. And so I took 4 tabs of acid and launched into it. And that was the first time I'd ever done it. And the big thing I remember from that first trip was driving around in the mountains in Josh's old Volkswagen Bug. And there were holes in the floorboards, so you could see the road going through. And we were listening to Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds loud. And the mercy seat is waiting, over and over and over and again. And it's pouring rain. And I'm in the back, like trying to keep my feet on the beams so that I don't go through to the road. And it's pouring rain, and rain is splashing up from the road and just tripping balls. And my friend Sam is in the passenger seat with a Coke bottle, and he's going, hey guys, nothing. and over the course of the trip, he must have done it 50 times. And I'm holding on, and we're racing down these deserted roads, and the next day, Sam told me that his Coke bottle was singing Elvis songs to him. And when he was trying to get our attention so that we could see, the Coke bottle was going, shh, 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 shh. So that's what that was happening. And it was not raining the night before at all. And his Volkswagen did not have holes in the floorboards. So I was in. I loved acid. Like after that, that was the most fun. It's if you've who's here done acid? Woo! Yeah, it's a nitrous engine through a funhouse, and I loved it. And part of that first acid trip sort of made me the way I was the rest of my acid experience, which is I was in control. Like when something terrifying happened, I could very calmly steer away from it and go that way. You know, when I started to think dark, scary thoughts that I didn't want to think, I was very, very competent at just like, okay, I'm not going to think about that. Or walk into a weird place I'd never been before, and that corner's got a scary, well, I'm not going to go into that corner. I'm going to go that way. And I think that's because the very first trip I ever had, I was pretending I was the pro. I'm the captain of the ship, guys. Don't worry. Everybody's okay. You're with me. I'm going to weather us through this storm. And that attitude kept me through acid my whole time I did acid. And there was really good acid around. This is in the late 80s. So I could trip balls and be in public. I did acid in museums and at school and in restaurants, and I could order. And nobody knew that I was totally fucking tripping balls and that people's faces were like melting off of their skulls. But I knew it was the acid, and I was totally in control. And part of that, I think, was because I was weird and quiet all the time anyway. But I spent a weekend in Vegas with people where I did 12 hits of acid over 3 days, and nobody knew. None of my friends knew that I was on acid. I always tripped alone, always, this whole time. After I left my buddies in Tennessee and went back to New York, I tripped alone. I think because I'm a weird private person and didn't want to share stuff, and I think because I've been around people who have a bad trip and you have to rescue them. And so you spend your trip keeping your shit together and like arranging the helicopters to get the guy down out of the ravine when you should just be fucking hiking in the Alps and having a great time. And so I tripped alone, and I tripped alone a lot. I was so good at people not knowing I was on acid, I got pretty casual about using it. I accidentally once tripped with my parents for 6 hours. My parents were not hippies. My parents were Church of Christ. My friends and I in Tennessee had a system. I had an uncle with a cabin way up in the mountains, like this Evil Dead-looking fucking cabin way out in the middle of nowhere. And so we would go up there and do acid and trip for days in a row. And so the system was Josh would call, we would hit, boom, because it was a 40-minute drive up to this cabin, so that like it would start to kick in when you left the highway and get onto the dirt road, so that you start to enter Wonderland when the road gets bumpy, and it was perfect. So New Year's Eve, he says, I'm starting the car, drop. So I drop, boom, 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 boom. And I'm sitting there, and I'm waiting for Josh to pull up. And 10 minutes go by, and 30 minutes go by, and an hour goes by. And my brain is starting to get weird. And Josh calls and said, car won't start, dude. Happy New Year. So any other night, my parents would have been in bed by 9. But it's New Year's, so they're up the whole time. So I'm there tripping balls, watching Dick Clark. And realizing that I am my father, which at 20 is a big realization to make. Like in 20, when you realize, oh, everything I'm doing, I'm thinking I'm this weird punk rock avant-garde dude. I'm just my dad. I drink the same fucking beer. I walk the same. I talk the same. I hate the same commercials. You know, and that at 20 is a big realization. Back in New York, I continued doing acid a lot. I did acid, and when it was warm, I hung out in Washington Square Park or Central Park and walked around, and when it was cold, I went into the Natural History Museum or the Met, because they were both free. The Natural History Museum, for those of you who don't know, I wrote the movie Night at the Museum, which makes a lot of sense that I did a lot of acid. I had a partner writing that, so I didn't write the whole thing. But there are moments in that movie that are totally fucking happened to me, man. Like Teddy Roosevelt never spoke to me, but I know the sensation in that museum of like walking down the dark halls and sort of forgetting where you are because you're listening to, oh wow, listen to that cool accent, listen to what those kids are talking about, and you forget where you are, and then all of a sudden, fucking dinosaur, fuck. Like, and you genuinely, for about half a second, think there's really a fucking alive dinosaur right there. And in this existence, half a second is a long time to think that there's really a dinosaur right there. And so I experienced that. And I also, the dioramas, like the dioramas in Natural History Museum in that movie are very much from my acid days. Because I remember looking at the dioramas and spending tons of time and thinking, how did they know when one of them, there's so many, how did they know one of them didn't get out? And then laughing hysterically in my head at how funny it would be to go to a guard and say, how do you know one of them didn't get out? And that was the drug. So I learned a lot on acid. The two big things that changed my life from that drug were I was a really angry kid. I was a punk rock. My parents were not great to me, or at least I thought not at the time. And I was a punk rock kid in Tennessee, so I had green hair in Tennessee. So people slashed my tires, and so I was an angry kid. And I took that anger with me to New York, and I cut myself, and I had pins in my skin, and I was a furious. And an acid trip gave me a big realization that, like ecstasy, when you make a realization on acid, it sticks if it's true. And I realized, like, I'm not obsessed about other people. I'm walking around Dulce thinking that everybody hates me, or thinking that everybody thinks I'm weird or stupid because of my accent, or everybody in NYU has better clothes than me, and I think everybody hates me. And I realized people don't think about people they don't know. People don't think about their coworkers. People are so wrapped up in their own brain that they're not hating you. They don't have time. They don't think about it. And that's a kind of an obvious realization to make. But without acid, I never would have made that realization. And it changed me from being a paranoid, hateful, angry person to, fine, I can just walk around. Nobody in this room's thinking about me. If I sit in the corner and keep my mouth shut, nobody gives a shit what I'm thinking. Which is huge. And it changed me from being angry to being okay. And the other thing that it did, acid, was I never wrote a word until I did acid, which is just true. Like, I hated writing in high school. I never wrote funny sketches. I was in the State for a year, and I didn't write any sketches the first 4 shows of the State. But acid did something. And I am now a professional writer. I make a lot of money, and I love it. And thank you. And I enjoy it. And I think it has something to do with some clogs that acid washed through And I think it comes from going to the Met and looking at paintings saying, wow, Christ looks like a boxer in that one. Hey, how you doing, St. Paul? What are you doing? Hey, let's go over to this and talk to this dragon. And like loosening up this weird sort of dialogue in my head that now is my fucking job. And that's acid. So I started using it so much that I really wasn't learning anything. I was just sort of fucking around on it. And I realized I can't do acid forever. I looked bad. I was skinny. I looked like Sid Vicious, which at the time I thought was cool, but my friends were worried about me, and I looked like I was about to drop dead because I never ate. My skin was bad. I was skinny, and I should stop. And I realized that if I was going to stop doing acid, I can't do it with having always avoided that monster in the corner. I knew that the scary idea in my head or the scary thing under the stairs, I always go, hey, I'm not going to think about that. And I know that if I'm really going to use acid as a tool to make my brain better, I have to face this thing. I have to find out what's there. And it's probably going to be okay. But I can't have avoided a big thing my brain is saying for all of these trips. So that's what I did. My big fear from doing this was two friends really ever for the first 17 years of my life, these two guys who did acid with me. And one of them, acid, totally fucked up. One of them was probably a better writer than I was, at least when I was 18. And acid changed him between freshman year and sophomore year, the time I saw him those 2 summers. I came back and he was a different guy. And I don't mean in an esoteric way. I mean, he couldn't put words together. He was a different guy. And he tried to explain to me once that he had a bad trip, that he was making out with some girl, and suddenly she was a mannequin. And then suddenly he was on the floor making out with this mannequin in a room full of people, and they were all watching him. And he said at the time, I don't know what really happened. I don't know, was it a girl that I freaked out with? Was I really making love with a mannequin? I don't know. But he lost something. He would say, I hit the fucking brake. Like when he wasn't on drugs, he would just sort of say that sometimes. So it wasn't like an esoteric, you're slightly a different guy. Like acid did something damaging to Sam. And so there's that. Part of my brain was like, is that going to happen to me? But I needed to do it if I was going to stop doing this drug. I needed to make this trip. I needed to go there. So I did. I took 5 hits of acid, and I went... the trip, geographically, I walked from where I lived on 10th in New York down to Washington Square Park, all the way up 5th Avenue to Central Park, through Central Park, down Broadway, back to 10th, which is about 20 miles. I walked this whole trip. It wasn't monsters that got me. Like, it's hard to describe, but the fear that happened, and I don't know how it began, was it's not that I couldn't remember who I was, and it's not that I didn't know who I was. It's that I knew who I was, and who I was nobody. I was nothing. And so I was walking around thinking, well, who are you? Who are you? Who are you? Well, I've got pink hair. Yeah, that's not you. That's bullshit. You're doing that to impress people so that you can avoid actual conversations. Who are you? Well, I'm an actor at NYU. You don't want to be an actor. You don't take it seriously. You're making fun in your head of all these people who want to be actors. Who are you? I'm from Tennessee. You don't want to be from Tennessee. You don't take pride in that. Who are you? And it was peeling an onion, and there was nothing in the middle of the onion. I knew all the things that I wasn't. I knew all the things I was pretending to be. There was nothing else. There was nothing in the middle. And it wasn't a esoteric, sitting on a psychiatrist's couch exploration of that. I was bawling and with snot running down my face and terrified because I didn't know where to go. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know how to go back to 10th Street because... I didn't know who I was. Like, very real, I wasn't anybody. It's terrifying. Thanks, Kevin, for suggesting this one. Thanks, guys. It's a really good ghost story, you guys. So I really genuinely didn't know who I was. And a couple of things came out of it. I shaved my head for the first time and never dyed my hair again. That's nothing. I had a Walkman that I used to listen to all the time, and I threw it into the reservoir in New York, Central Park, because I realized I was avoiding people by listening to music instead of really being where I was. I used to, at the end of stage shows, there would be parties, and I never went. I would go away because I was scared. I didn't want to be there. This is my phone now. It doesn't play music. It doesn't have videos. Because I want to be here. And this was 20 years ago. But it was because it taught me that I was avoiding just being where I was and being myself to the extent that I wasn't anybody. And I would say in a very real way, who I am now started that night. That I realized, I'm nobody yet. But I have to start to be something. I have to really start to listen to people and be honest with people and open people and be something, even if it means I suck. I have to be that. Even if it means I have to, let people know what I'm good at and what I'm bad at. And that's really when I began to realize, I'm going to be a writer. Even if I'm not good at it, that's the one thing that I'm kind of doing, and I'm going to do it. I kind of opened up to people, and I'm still not the most open person in the world. As anybody who knows me knows, I'm still very, very quiet and very, very shy. But I'm a writer.
You're somebody.
Well, that's not what I mean. Everybody is somebody. But I'm a writer. I know that. I don't have many friends, but the friends I have know everything there is to know about me, and I trust them and I love them, which I didn't have before. And I'm doing great. I'm not living on the street. I have a big giant house from all these stupid movies, but it really made me who I am by washing the slate clean and making me realize that I, at that point, really was a bunch of bullshit that I was telling people. And that's a good thing to learn at such an early age. And the other weird thing that I think about a lot is, Sam took some weird acid and he never came back. Me too. There was another guy that took those 5 tabs, and that guy's gone.
Someone I've known a lot longer, Ben Garant, who is a fellow member of The State. You know him from Reno 911. He's written a whole slew of movies, including the Night at the Museum trilogy, and he has been on Risk several times. We love having him. Here he is now at the Risk Live show in Los Angeles at the Nerdist showroom with a story we call Good Work.
I guess this story is about the worst job I ever had and the best job I ever had. And I guess I should start by saying that, and I don't know if this is normal or not, because I've never said it to anybody, but this is, I think, normal. I've been very worried for my entire life about dying, starving to death on the street, homeless and broke with no money for food. I don't know if everybody does this, but I calculate daily, look up how much money I have, and then figure out how much, based on what I'm spending, if for some reason nobody ever hires me for anything again, how long until I die of starvation? I did it today. I'll be 82, so things are going good. But no bullshit. I do it every day. It's a real, legitimate thing. When I moved to New York, I went to New York City to go to NYU. And on weekends and in the summers, because I stayed up there, I had all kinds of shitty jobs. And some good jobs, too. And the worst job I ever had, I knew it was going to be bad from I got the job too easy. The interview, I had on my one button down and my shoes from Calhoun's. And they said, after the interview, they said, great, you're hired. I was like, oh, fuck, what is this? And it was to go door to door asking for contributions for a charity that was supposed to do stuff for the environment. So I went, and it was this weird office in Midtown that was very temporary. It was this big room, as big as this, and there was one desk with 14 phones on it and folding chairs. And they said, okay, this is what you're going to do. You all are going to go door to door in New Jersey, and you're going to ask money for this charity. And here's the brochure right here. And it was me, and like everybody was either like a kid my age, I was like 17, or it was like people who didn't speak English very well. And I was like, what is this? And they were very vague about what the charity was. What they said was, it's for the environment. And somebody said, if people ask what the charity does, what does it do? And they said, well, it's a legal thing for the environment. All right. So we all went downstairs. They put us in groups of 15, and they said, okay, who here has a driver's license? I had a driver's license. They said, okay, you're driving. So they put me driving this van, this white passenger van with 15 people out to New Jersey over the George Washington Bridge. And I got there, and I started going door to door. And after the first couple of doors, I realized, like, I'm fucked. Like, I can't, these people ask questions, and I don't know what the answer is. They were like, so what does your thing do? Well, we're for the environment. Okay, well, we're a little busy today. And some people were mad. Some people were really, really mad that I knocked on their door. And so after a while, I was terrified. I started just making up shit. I knew a little bit about Southern Poverty Law Center, so I just started saying stuff about that. I was like, well, what it is it's they support lawsuits. Say Chevron has come into your rainforest. They give the money to that so you can sue these people. Or if, you know, they've poisoned your river. And I just started making up shit. And half of the people were really, really mad, and half of the people gave me money. And the people who gave me money made me feel really, really horrible. And I was walking door to door, being yelled at by people in Jersey accents, or like being given checks for $20, I realized I'm just begging for myself. This isn't a job. I'm going door to door and begging. And I should just say, I'm broke, I need a job, would you give me $20? But instead I'm like lying to people. I'm saying this totally made up thing. And so I got back I went into one house, nobody answered, and I went around the back, and I saw the family in the backyard, and it was a guy with his 2 kids and his wife. And so I went around the side of the house, and this big fucking Tony Soprano looking guy was like, what you fucking people do is wrong. It's wrong. This is my castle. This is my home. And I was just like, fuck. So I went home and I quit. I quit after one day, which was hard because they paid us in cash at the end of the day, and I got an extra $5 for driving each way. So I had like $40 in my pocket. And I was like, fuck, I can't come back and do this. The best job I ever had in New York, and the best job I've ever had in my life, came out of these same circumstances. I went to NYU to study acting. The tuition was about $18,000 a semester, counting housing and everything. It was all loans. I got a scholarship of $2,000, but that was only for the first 2 semesters. And I got a grant for being from East Tennessee because it was Appalachia. $4,000 a semester just because Appalachia is so fucked. And like they don't, so I was like, yeah, I've never worked in a coal mine, but fuck it, I'll take the money, yeah. But for being from Appalachia, NYU gave me $4,000 a semester, but it still left like $11,000 a semester. And that's when the clock started ticking in my head of like, I'm going to die on the street with no money and owing the banks all of this money. And NYU, I came there passionate and cocky, and I was going to be an actor. First, I learned I suck at acting. Like, I thought I was great. In East Tennessee, I was fucking Marlon Brando. And now I realize that I'm nothing. I'm terrible. And then I realized I don't even know what I'm doing. Everything I thought I was doing was wrong, and everything they're teaching me is something that doesn't even make sense to me. And then I started hating acting and actors and everything. I just hated it. And I started realizing this is a racket. Like, none of you guys teaching this shit, if you could do it, you would do it. Like, if you could actually make a living acting, you wouldn't be teaching me whatever slice of $11,000 you're getting. Like, you would do it. You would be fucking Brad Pitt, and you'd be making a fortune. And I was just bitter, and I hated it, and I gave up acting for the rest of my life through NYU. Thanks. And so junior year, while I was starting to do the math every day of like, okay, how long till I pay off this stuff? Okay, if I never work again, I should have died 4 years ago. Todd Hollebeck, I was in a comedy group called The New Group that became The State, and Todd Hollebeck came in and said, hey, I found a job. If anybody, they're having auditions for this job. Come and who wants to do it? And we all went. And it was to be a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. And we all went, the entire state, everybody. And some people flat out didn't fit in the costumes. Michael Jan didn't fit in the costume. Ken Marino didn't fit in the costume. I fit in the costume. And so we went and did we tried to do the accent, and we all bought the comic books, and we were actors. So we were working on the experience of, they were mutants and they lived in a sewer. What does that mean? And they basically said, okay, if you want the job, it's yours. You fit in the costumes. We said, great. And they said, who can be in Detroit in 4 days? And I was a full-time student at NYU. And Michael Black and I talked ourselves into it on the subway ride down. The money, it was like $2,000 a week. It was crazy. By the end of it, I did it for 9 months. And by the end of it, it paid off NYU and bought my apartment for 2 years in New York City. I was doing the math on the subway. What the job was, I don't know how old everybody is here. Does everybody remember how big the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were? So this was after the first movie, but before the Vanilla Ice one. They did a tour of the country, and at Pizza Hut, you could buy a cassette tape of their album. And it did a month sold-out run at Radio City Music Hall. And then it went in every single state for 9 months. It did a tour. And what it was it was a rock and roll concert, and they came out and they sang the songs from the album, but then Shredder came and kidnapped April, and so they had to fight Shredder and then finish the show. And so it was Broadway dancers in these outfits, but the outfits looked like the movie. They were lighter weight than the movie, so these dancers could dance. And the heads were audio animatronic pre-programmed, and the voices were pre-recorded. So the faces did everything. So the guys in the costumes just danced around, and the faces were like, "Cowabunga, dude!" Did the voices. And so they arranged this huge tour, and it was sold out all over the country. And they realized, how do we do promotion? Because the dancers can't talk. The dancers are a city behind. They don't know how to do the voice. It's a bunch of Broadway dancer dudes. They needed somebody to go 1 week advance and do promotion. So me and Michael Black, and I was Michelangelo, and Michael Black was Raphael. And we went in a van. They gave us a Chevy Astro and 2 big giant coffins in the back that had the costume and the audio animatronic stuff, and they would fax us our orders in each city. So we would get to Detroit, and we would get a fax, and it would tell us what we were doing, and we did 6 morning zoos that we would go onto the radio from 5 in the morning till 8, and kids would call. Kids hadn't gone to school yet. What kind of pizza do you like? Free pizza, dude, and promote the show. And we would, and it was great. So every city was from 5 to 9 was morning zoos, and then we would go do the local weather, whoever the funny weather guy was in Omaha, you would do the weather with him, and they always did it at a pet store. Hey, wouldn't it be funny if we were at a pet store? And so they're at it, we're at this pet store looking oh my gosh, and then Michelangelo would come out, whoa, what's the weather, dude? And then we would go to a school, often with McGruff the crime dog, and talk about how drugs just aren't cool, man. With Dare. So it was us and a cop and McGruff the crime dog, and would talk. And the suits looked great. The suits were the ones from the movie. And sometimes one of us would be doing the voice off stage while the other one was pantomiming. And you were off stage doing the voice and working the mouth and working the eyes and making it sound like it really looks cool. And the guy on stage would be just pantomiming. And it looked like the fucking movie. So kids never, ever, ever, I swear to God, in 9 months, nobody ever asked, "Are you in a costume?" Not once. People the kids just bought it. So it was being a rock star for 7-year-olds. We went all over. We went to every single state. I'd never seen most of the country before. We went to Puerto Rico. In Puerto Rico, we were in a van with the local promoters. We did an appearance there for live television, and it was this live 2-hour TV show in Puerto Rico. There was this old guy in a tuxedo and this big, divine-looking drag queen named Cake. And they said, okay, so what we're gonna do is a thing where we're just gonna film it and we'll do it live. So it's gonna be on every TV in Puerto Rico live. And you're trying to get past the bouncer, explaining that you're Michelangelo, but the bouncer's not gonna have you on the list, and so you guys scuffle. And it's all through a translator because I don't speak Spanish. I'm like, well, okay, how long does this last? And they're like, 10 minutes? Like, okay, great. So I'm Michelangelo, and I'm come up. Yeah, I'm on the thing, dude, and I'm on the list. I should be on the list. And the regular character on this was the old, 100-year-old security guy who's always giving people a hard time. You can't get in here, share. He's that guy. And so I was like, okay, this is what I'll do. I'll come up, and then I'll try to kung fu you, because I'm a Ninja Turtle. And I'll kung fu you a couple times, and we'll kind of play kung fu, and then I'll get in. And everybody was like, great. So I come up to this guy, and I'm like, hey, I'm on the list. And the translator says, hey, Tortugas Ninja. And the old man is like, no, he's not on the list. So I start kung fuing him, and the first time I kick him, I hit him, and he goes down, boom! And hits his head on this linoleum floor, and it's bleeding. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And I look over, and everybody behind the camera's just like, go, 9 minutes. And so we kind of Benny Hill chase each other around, and everybody doesn't care. And this guy is trying to get up and bleeding on the floor, and we're doing crazy. He was okay. It was a great experience. And it really changed I was just this is just fucking fun. I'm having a great time. What's the song? The songs were, for those of you who don't remember, one of them was, yo, I'm the one they call Michelangelo. Let me kick my story, just say so. Born like a pet, just like the rest of them. I grew up wild to party with the best of them. Living loose, living large, with my shell. Now I'm in charge. It's not that I'm crass, not that I'm crude, just that I'm a naturally tuberly dude. Did it 200 times. So, I saw the whole country. At 19, it was great. I remember they gave me a room in Vegas way off the strip, but I had a hot tub in the middle of the fucking room, and there was an honor bar. So it was the first beer I'd had since New York. And I sat in my own hot tub and watched The Simpsons. And it was just I felt like fucking Tony Montana. I was just yeah, this is, this is fucking great. And part of the job was we always went to children's hospitals at every single city. So we would go through these children's hospitals and greet all these kids, and some of them were kids with broken arms, and a lot of them were really, really, really sick. And the first time I thought I was going to go in, I was terrified. I didn't know if I could handle it. But you go in, and you're just the turtle, so it didn't really matter. And they didn't think of you as an adult, and so they sort of lit up and were happy to see you come in. And you say, yeah, how you doing, dude? Yeah, you look good. Yeah, I'm bald too. It was this thing, and it really and Pizza Hut had some kind of understanding with the Make-A-Wish program. So Make-A-Wish, which grants wishes to kids who are dying with leukemia, in every single city, there was at least one and sometimes 4 kids dying of leukemia who their wish list was to meet a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. So they would, Pizza Hut would close for this kid and their friends, and I would go, and I'd go in the back door, this sweaty, disgusting 19-year-old punk rock guy, and I would always change in the walk-in freezer, change into the big thing, and then sneak out the back door, and they would have the local radio station limo, and I would get into that, and it would go around the building, and I would come out, yeah, dude, and I would go inside and talk to these kids. And at first I couldn't look at them, and I was worried because the outfit looks good, but the eyes don't move when you're in it. The eyes only moved if there was somebody operating it, and the mouth looked pretty good. It was fitted to my chin, so it went blah blah blah. It wasn't just a Mickey Mouse, nothing. So when I talked, it moved. But I was worried that they would think, oh, this is a kind of costume. And then when I finally, the second or third one, looked up in their eyes, I realized that they are scared to look at my face too. That they're just kind of looking at my chest and hey, how are you? And never once did I get asked, is it hot in there? You know, like never once did they ask me, like, is that stuffy? Like, can you see me? Like, they were just, I was fucking Michelangelo to all of these fucking kids. One kid once said, "You're really Michelangelo." And I said, "No, I'm Donatello. I change masks to mess with you, dude." And it killed. And so my best job that I ever had was looking at little children who were dying and lying right to their face. I'm like, it was 25 years ago, and my whole life I've been trying to find something that good to do again, and I haven't even come close. Thank you.
The day that the rains came down, Mother Earth smiled.
It's St. Patrick's Day, 1982. It's a Friday, evening rush hour. It's raining sheets and sheets. And so the evening rush hour is complicated by that. And I'm on 9th Avenue, headed down to the Lincoln Tunnel to go to my third of 3 jobs in West Orange, New Jersey. And I'm in my 1974 Buick Apollo, this car that I bought in Wisconsin, where I grew up. We actually bought it from my hometown. It's a little intimidated by the big city. It doesn't really know anybody here. Feels like it's not a fancy, cool New York car. It's just a little Wisconsin car. And I feel about my car like I do my relationship. It's keeping me going. It's always breaking down. And it's got a lot of miles on it. Now, in the case of my relationship, it literally has a lot of miles on it. Like, my boyfriend lives in Australia, where I was living with him right before I moved to the East Coast, just about a year before this day. Philip is this very charismatic, very handsome, very tall, sort of an enigmatic, sad person who I found that absolutely compelling when I met him, this sort of dark, brooding intensity about him. And when he used to say to me that I was the light in his darkness, I loved that. And I was so in love with him, and I wanted to be that. And I also thought that it might kill me. I had this internship in New Jersey, and so I took it thinking that we couldn't be together because we got along better when we had 2 oceans between us. Now that I've been here on the East Coast for a year, all I can think about is getting back there to be with him. Now, I had dreamed of going to Australia when I lived in Wisconsin, because in Wisconsin, where I was in college and it was some rough emotional times, everyone I love is there, but I had to get away. I really had to get away from some of the dramas that were going on in my family and among the people that I loved. And the thought of getting to Australia and being with him during that last year of college was something that really kept me going. And now I feel like that again. I've got to get back there. I've got it figured out now. And now I can handle it. I know what to do to make it work with him. So that's all I do is work and save money and try to get back there. So here I am on my way to my third of 3 jobs. I'm about halfway through the Lincoln Tunnel, somewhere between New York and New Jersey and the line, when my car just stops moving. Just stops. It's running, but it doesn't move. Now, the Lincoln Tunnel is this enormous, cavernous, dark, kind of grimy world underneath the ground. And now it is filled with cars that are honking and people screaming because after traffic has been slow, now is stopped altogether. I'm just sitting there thinking, how do I get out of here? because I'm from Wisconsin, I immediately feel responsible for all these people whose lives have been further inconvenienced by my breakdown. So I get out of the car and I'm standing in the middle of this enormous tunnel saying to people, mouthing to people, I don't know why it won't go. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And people are giving me the finger and screaming at me and saying they're going to kill me. I'm just overwhelmed because it's just like I'm this tiny little mouse in a huge basement, like an enormous basement filled with cars. And then I hear this robotic voice. Please get back in your vehicle, return to your vehicle. And I look and I see this strange device manned by a guy sitting in it that comes along the side of the Lincoln Tunnel from the Jersey side where I'm headed and tows me to the mouth of the Lincoln Tunnel on the Jersey side, drops my car off there. People are passing me, giving me the finger, cursing at me. Everybody hates me. And now I'm standing in the pouring rain, standing in a phone booth, soaking wet, with a stack of yellow pages. I have $7, my checkbook, which has maybe $150 in it, and that's it. I have not made any friends that I know well enough to ask to come and get me on a night like this. All I can see are headlights into infinity on the Jersey side. So I just start calling tow companies, hoping they'll answer, hoping once I reach them that they will take pity on me and tow me out of here. So they're closed. They already got their drink on. It's St. Patrick's Day. They don't answer. A half hour goes by, an hour goes by, and it takes me a little time now in between calls because my hysteria is rising. I see in the yellow pages, I see there's a towing company and a garage not that far from my apartment. And I'm just got my fingers crossed that they answer the phone and I can keep this guy on the phone. That's all I got to keep this guy on the phone so he doesn't hang up on me. And this guy answers and I tell him where I am and he's about to hang up. And I know I have to do something to keep him from hanging up on me. So I just lose it. I just weep and beg. No, you don't understand. I don't know anybody here. I'm new here in New York. I don't know anybody to call. Only you're my only hope. You have to come and help me. Please don't leave me here. Please don't leave me here at the side of the Lincoln Tunnel for the rest of my life. And so this guy takes pity on me and he says, okay, lady, we won't leave you stranded here. I'll come and get you before I close up. So now I have to ask the loaded question. Do you take checks? Silence. I know I have to do something to keep him hanging up on me, so I start weeping and begging again. No, really, the check is good. You don't understand. I haven't lived here that long. I don't know why. Please, 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 you can't leave me here. So he says, okay, all right. I'll come and get you. So now I settle into my car, expecting a very long wait, because I don't know how this guy's going to get here before morning. It's so much traffic, rain, and it feels like midnight, and it's really about 7 o'clock. So about 40 minutes later, I'm staring into the dark and into the rain. This beam of light just breaks open from the fog. Comes this beautiful, beautiful machine. The lights break through and shine on me, and there's a guy grinning down at me from this beautiful tow truck that somehow made it there in 45 minutes. And before I know it, he's got my car hooked up to the back of his machine, dangling like a landed marlin, just in the breeze, back and forth. And now I'm in the cab of the truck, and I feel better. I feel I'm saved. I can't believe it. I'm getting home tonight. I'm going to get, and he's a very nice person who feels very bad for me in this situation. Drives me right to the front of my apartment. He says, I'll take the car in. I'll try to figure out what's wrong with it, but you're home. You're dry. You're okay. I'll call you and let you know. So I go to pay him. I give him the check and my ID. And then another long pause. I said, what's wrong? He says, I don't know if I can accept this. My stomach just drops. Why? What? He says, well, you have a check from a New York bank. It has a New Jersey address on it, and you have a Wisconsin driver's license. And when he says that, again, my stomach just drops. Like somehow this has escaped my notice over a year's time. A little detail I never took care of. And I know I have to do something to get him to take that check and accept it. So I just start weeping and begging, and I'm like, no, really, the check is good. You don't understand. I don't know how I let this happen. I'm so sorry. I don't know how I let this happen. I feel so stupid. I said, just keep the car until the check clears. It's okay. So I go inside, and I'm sitting there thinking, how did this happen? Why? How did I let myself get in a situation like this? About 30 minutes later, the guy calls me back, says, your car's running. I put transmission fluid in it. You just have to figure out why it drained out, but I'm going to drop it off. You're okay. You don't even have to, don't give me another check. Monday morning, I'm at the Department of Motor Vehicles of New Jersey to get my New Jersey driver's license because I'm not going to let this happen to me again. And the lady, so kind, says in that Department of Motor Vehicle way, you can't have a driver's license from 2 different states at the same time, which I did not know. Will you surrender your Wisconsin driver's license? Like this is a big formal ceremony of some kind. I never heard that word used in this context, but I say, okay, yes, I'm surrendering my Wisconsin driver's license, and I do. When I hand that Wisconsin driver's license over, I feel waves and waves of grief and loss and emptiness. And I know now why I never got a New Jersey driver's license, because that would mean that this is the state I really live in, and that this relationship is really over. And being here on the East Coast is much harder and lonelier and emptier than I ever dreamed it would be. And this dream of going back to Australia has used itself up. That dream got me through a hard time when I was younger, and now that dream is over, and I really have to be here now. I have to be in the state that I actually live in. And the state that I live in is emotionally pretty sad. And I know that I can do it. I have to handle it. I'm here now. And it helps that I got a AAA card and a Visa card. And if I do start dating again, maybe I should think about dating a mechanic.
So without further ado, let's hear it. This is Scott Whitney with a story we call Revelations.
It's a Saturday morning, and I'm working in a housing project, knocking on doors. I'm in this hallway with brown industrial carpeting. The sounds of daytime TV are spilling out from the apartments, along with the smell of cheap soap. And I turn to the door on my right. It's my turn to knock. I knock on this hollow core door, and I can hear the sound reverberate in the apartment. And as usual, I'm praying, metaphorically, that the person won't come to the door. The door opens up, and the first thing that I notice is that the apartment is pitch black. And as my eyes adjust, I see the man that I would come to know as Paul. His face looked like he hadn't aged at all, and he had aged horribly at the same time. It was round and kindly and cherubic, but it was also pale and pockmarked and weathered. His hair was just a tangled mess, like he had had bedhead for a decade. And I noticed that his fingers wrapped around the door jamb were just stained yellow with nicotine stains. Then I noticed this tangle of burned flesh at his wrist, and it disappeared under the sleeve of his long john shirt, and then it reappeared right at the base of his throat and wrapped around the back of his neck up across his head. Something horrible had happened to this man. And I was kind of brought back to the moment when he said, in this really kind way, "Hi, what can I do for you this morning?" And I launched into the presentation that I'd done a million times. hi, my name is Scott. I know you weren't expecting me. I won't take up much of your time. And then I'd get into some kind of existential theme that I could sort of get behind. And I asked him, do you think it's reasonable to believe, in the face of all the injustice that we see in the world today, that there is some kind of God that exists and is interested in us? And I really didn't have an answer to that question at this point, at least one that satisfied me. But fortunately, not too many people were interested in hearing my answer, so it worked out. But Paul was. He said, yeah, I have no doubt that God exists. And I'm equally sure that he has no interest in me. I had been one of Jehovah's Witnesses almost my entire life. And I had always really struggled with the structure, with the regimen of that lifestyle. I hated going to people's doors like this and telling them things they didn't want to hear when they didn't want to hear them. I hated having to explain to my coworkers that I didn't celebrate Christmas because originally it was a holiday that honored the Roman god Saturnalia. When inside I'm thinking, who gives a shit? There's a lot of good reasons not to celebrate Christmas. That isn't one. I just struggled with the whole structure of the lifestyle. But on the flip side, I totally bought the belief system. It made sense to me. It provided satisfying answers to a lot of the big questions, whether or not God existed. And if so, what was my responsibility in the face of that? Why is the world so fucked up, and is it going to get better? These all had satisfying answers, and fundamentally, it felt true. It felt like I had truth. And if I had truth, then suddenly I didn't have any choices to make. What I wanted didn't matter. That was irrelevant. All that mattered was truth. But when I hit 30, the old stories started to break down, and I could feel that I just didn't have the conviction that I once did. And I had this nagging doubt in the back of my head that if this wasn't truth, I'm as obligated to get out as I had been to stay. But I also had to consider the implications, because if I walk away from this faith, I am entirely losing my community. Friends, family, literally will pass me on the street as though I'm a ghost. So I need to be pretty damn sure. There's really no taking a break either to sort this stuff out. If I stopped going to meetings or stopped going out in field service, that is knocking on people's doors, I'm going to hear about it out of concern. My friends are going to pay attention because they're concerned. And attention is the last thing that I wanted when I'm trying to sort this stuff out. So I decided to try to work it out under the radar and just go through the motions. And that meant continuing to go out in field service. Knocking on people's door on a Saturday morning is weird, even if you're not experiencing a crisis of faith. You're there wearing a tie, you got a book bag and a Bible, trying not to feel like a salesman, and nobody wants you there. People would slam the door in my face pretty regularly. One guy came to the door cleaning his gun in some kind of gesture. What you really wanted were return visits. That's when you had already called on somebody cold and they agreed to let you come back. So you got a better chance of seeing somebody with a friendly face. They may not answer, but the other benefit is that you get to drive out to their place on a Saturday morning and eat up some time when you would normally be knocking on doors of people that don't want to talk to you. So RVs are the place to be. I remember when I was a kid, I had a friend, we couldn't have been older than 12. I had a friend that announced in a car group when we were out in field service that he had a return visit. This guy that he really had to get back and talk to. So because this is just more productive than everything else we could be doing, we drove the 45 minutes out to the return visit. And then we just start driving up and down these suburban streets because he can't remember the address. And we're just hunting for this house for almost an hour until he finally gets really excited and points and says, "That's it, that's the house. I totally remember." So we pull over, he and I jump out, we run up to the door, and just as he's about to knock on the door, he turns to me and admits, "I have no idea who lives here. I'm totally faking this." So we just sort of pantomime knocking on the door for the sake of the people in the car and then run back. But, you know, it ate up 2.5 hours. And if I'm honest, things really hadn't changed a lot for me at 30. In the face of this period of deep crisis of faith, I had encountered this man, Paul, that seemed really interested in what we had to say and what we were talking to people about. At the end of our chat, I asked him, as I always did, if it would be all right if we came back, if we set up a return visit, and now would be the time for Paul to say, "No, I appreciate you stopping by. It was great talking to you, but I'm all set." But Paul didn't say that. He said, "Yeah, that'd be great. Look forward to seeing you next week." So the next Saturday, I went back to Paul's, and miraculously, he answered the door again. We picked up the conversation right where we left off, and it was in that conversation that Paul told me how he got those burns. He had suffered from mental illness almost his entire life. And when he was much younger, that manifested itself in this deep and real sense that he was evil. When he reached his late teens and early 20s, he started to hear this internal voice, and it identified as Christ. And that voice said to him, "Paul, you're beyond redemption. It would be better if you didn't exist. You are an enemy of mine." In his mid-20s, he really started to take on what that voice was saying. He said, "One night I had just had it. I just felt like I was drowning in these voices, and I decided to do something about it. So I climbed a utility pole by my house, and I reached out and I grabbed a hold of the high-tension wires. And the last thing that I remembered was just an explosion of white light." The next morning, Paul woke up in the emergency room. He'd survived, but of course now he was horrifically disfigured. And as he laid in that ER bed in the days after, the voice came back to him, and it said, "You survived, but don't think that anything has changed. You're still beyond redemption." And after he left the hospital, Paul became a recluse, and one Saturday morning, I knocked on his door. So as I kept going back to Paul's and we kept having these conversations, I was really wrestling with what to do, because he seemed to really be enjoying the message that I was sharing with him. But it was a message that I really didn't value anymore. He seemed to derive hope and comfort from the thoughts that had sustained me for so long, but to me they just seemed vapid and hollow now. And then I thought, who am I to impose my crisis of faith on this guy who seems to really be responding to it? My doubts are just a voice that I'm hearing. It really has no place in this conversation with this man. So instead, I told him what I knew I could, what had worked for me for so long. He would tell me, "Scott, I'm telling you that I'm so confident that I'm doomed, that I'm just waiting out my days." And I would tell him, that's really not what the Bible says. There's no such thing, as I understood it, between being damned for all time and saved for all time. It doesn't work like that. We're each free moral agents making decisions in the moment. And if you want to choose differently, if you come to understand that God expects something different of you than what you've been doing, you get to do it right now. The past is the past. And again, Paul, that just resonated for him. But each time I went back, as the weeks and months went on, Paul seemed to respond less and less to that message. As much as I tried to reinforce that his fate had not been written for him, he constantly had objections, whether it be the voice that he heard, his own feeling of self-worth, and he started to pull back from our conversations to some extent. Simultaneously, my doubts were not going away, and I stopped using the literature that we would use. I started just relying, and even this rarely, on some of the Bible verses that were kind of existential and had given me pause to reflect over the years. But even that was tough. It was tough to hear my own words. Things were falling apart. One Saturday morning, I went to Paul's apartment in field service, and I saw his car parked in the parking lot. When I went in the hallway, I heard his TV playing in his apartment. I knocked on his door, and Paul didn't answer. I knocked again, and I could hear him moving around inside, but he didn't want to answer the door. So I went back the next Saturday morning, and the same thing happened. The Saturday after that, I decided to give it one more try. So I went and met with the group that was going to be going out in field service before I went to go visit Paul. And when I walked into the building, a good friend of mine came up, and she seemed really concerned, and she leaned in and whispered to me and said, "There's a message for you on the machine that I think you should hear." So I went into the back room and hit play. The answering machine started to play Paul's voice, and he said, "This message is for Scott. This is Paul. Scott, everything you've been telling me over almost the past year, the entire message that you've been sharing with me, has left me more fucked up than I have ever been. I feel so turned around and confused. I don't know which way is up. I feel despondent. I can only assume that that was your intention, and so congratulations. But please, never stop here again." And I remember as that message played out, feeling like my feet were just anchored in concrete. I was leaning forward towards the machine, and it just felt like I could lean forward and touch my nose to the ground without falling over. And I remember thinking, he's mentally ill. This isn't about what I was telling him. This is not about me. I hadn't caused him any harm. And then I wished that I could be so sure. And that was the last time that I ever heard from Paul. That was the last time I ever went to anybody else's door. And it was the last time that I ever felt like I had any kind of responsibility to a God that I couldn't understand.
Thank you very much.
I was 27 years old, and I was completely miserable. My job, I had initially thought it would be more creative. It turns out it wasn't. I'm a creative person. I love to write, I love to produce, I'm an actor. And I had just gotten a new boss, and her method of communication was exclusively via voicemail, which is to say, she would be in her office and the door would be closed. You couldn't knock on the door and talk to her. You'd have to call her. It would go immediately to voicemail. You'd leave the voicemail, and you knew she was in there because a minute later you would get a voicemail that would suddenly appear on your phone back, and usually the message was, "Yes, please fire this person." And I felt like I was a cog in this brutal corporate machine. It was not at all what I had signed up for. But thankfully, the summer did end, and I left for New York City on Labor Day weekend. Two dear friends of mine were getting married. And so I fly into town Friday night, and I hit the ground running. I remember feeling so exuberant. The moment I got out of Penn Station, I literally walked 40 blocks to this person's, like, dragging luggage behind me of like, yes, I am feeling it. It is good. There is an excitement to this night. And stayed with my friend in Williamsburg in Brooklyn. And then the next day, woke up and had an absolutely perfect New York City day. Because it's a holiday weekend, there would be just people in the streets having parties, and this was astonishing to me. It'd be just friends of friends saying, "Hey, come on over, have a beer, have some hot dogs," and I began to feel something very alien to me. I began to feel happy. These were exciting, creative people. We were playing, we were having fun, we were doing silly things. I felt like I was finally beginning to dig my way out of this horrible situation I was in. I would go back to LA and things would get better. And so it's 3:30 a.m. It's almost last call. We decide we're going to leave the bar. My friend walks me back to the place that I'm staying at in Brooklyn on a street named Hope, which I noted. And we part ways. He continues on home to his place a little down the way. And so I look back at this building that I had just been staying at, this old 6-story industrial loft, and I realize I don't remember how to get the fuck back in. There's like a few doors in a row, one's for an apartment, one's the elevator, and one's the staircase. And I remember taking the elevator that previous night and going, I am never getting back in this thing again. It is old and rickety and it's weird. I don't understand it. You've got to like pull the door. There's like, it was ridiculous, and I just didn't want to touch it. So I remembered where the staircase was. I was going back in there. I grab my key, and I go to this door, and there's no keyhole. And it's super dark, and I'm super tired. And so I step back onto the street, look back at this whole picture, scratching my head. I think, I will call my friend. She's sleeping up on the 6th floor. She's probably even awake. I'll give her a call. She'll come back down. We'll sort this whole thing out. So I'm dialing this number, and my phone dies because the battery is low. And I am stuck here in the middle of this street at 3:30 in the morning, and I have nowhere to go and no one to call. I have one chance left. So I walk back to the door. I give it a tug. It's a double door. The left door creaks and groans. It doesn't quite move. So I rear back, give it one more pull. The right door opens, and here I am. Freedom at last. And so I step in. And then I just keep stepping into this black hole. And it is shocking to me. It's all happening so quickly. There's wind that's racing past me, and I'm feeling this incredible acceleration, but I can see nothing. And suddenly, I see stars. And there is whiteness, and there is pain, and it feels like my entire body has been punched. And there's a moment where I don't understand what's happening. Something is very wrong. I feel like I must have lost a tooth, so the first thing I go for is my face. And all of my teeth are there, but it doesn't feel like they should be. And so then I try to get to my feet, and it turns out I can, but I have to favor the left side of my body because my right side does not feel good. And I look around, and there is pitch blackness. I see nothing. And I look up, and high above me is a tiny, door-sized sliver of light. And I realize, oh, that's where I came from. This is not the staircase. And I remember that right before I had stepped in, there was a guy that had been walking past talking on his cell phone with his friend. And I scream, "Hey, please help!" And suddenly his face appears in the doorway, high above me. And he says, "Yes?" And I say, "I'm sorry, I fell down this elevator shaft." And he says, "Really? Bullshit. Really?" And I say, "Yes, I really fell down this fucking elevator shaft. Please, can you call someone?" And he's talking with his friend. And he says, I will call you right back." And he hangs up and he dials 911. Meanwhile, I'm looking around and my eyes are starting to adjust to the light. I'm starting to see what's on the walls, and it's just brick. I'm in the bottom of this pit, and there's nowhere that I can go. And I start to hear voices, and I realize that it's coming from the elevator. Now, the elevator is not on the ground floor, where I came in from, and it's not on the basement floor, which is where I landed, but it's on the 5th floor. And there are voices above, and they're coming into the elevator, friends saying goodbye to each other, coming down the elevator onto me. And so I yell up as loud as I can, "Hey, please stop! Stop! And they're not stopping. They don't hear. And my Good Samaritan's on the line with the firefighter, and he has to stop, and he yells up at them too, and we're both yelling, stop! Please, stop! I'm down here! And finally they hear us. I hear, oh my God. And there's scrambling because the machinery is starting to move. The door is closed. The cycle has begun. And they pull the emergency brake or whatever it is on that thing, but I hear a grinding of gears and the elevator stops. So that out of the way, I decide to do the only thing that I can do, which is look for my glasses, which have fallen off in the melee. And I'm beginning to see a little better, and I'm beginning to see the ground, and I'm feeling around it at first, and there's like, it's shitty down there. It's gross. There are these old bags and discarded tissues, and I'm feeling all of this crap, and I'm beginning to finally see, and what I'm seeing is that what I've landed on is miraculously a dirt floor. I begin to touch my first piece of metal, and I realize that there is metal all around. Metal in the form of spikes that are jutting out of the ground to interact with the elevator as it comes down. This whole elevator apparatus is all around me, and there are sharp spikes, and I had made a perfect swan dive into the middle of this dirt floor, and it somehow missed everything that was around me. And I'm like, I gotta look for my fucking glasses and find these. I'm gonna put these puppies on my face, and I'm gonna dust myself off, and I'm gonna take a hot shower, and I'm gonna go to this wedding in 12 hours because that is what I need to get to do. And so it becomes this race to find the glasses before the paramedics are there so that I can be okay again. And I'm starting to hear sirens, and they're coming closer. And as the flashing lights start to appear through the crack in the door high above, success. I find the glasses, and I smile, and I put them on my face. And the moment I put them on my face, I realize, holy shit, they are at a 90-degree angle. They are hanging off of like the one side of them is like on my forehead and the other side is on my ear. And so I threw them on the ground and looked up just as high above a firefighter strides to the edge of this door and looks down on me. And he is mustachioed. He is got his hands on his hips. He is quietly and casually heroic. And he surveys the scene slowly, and he looks down at me. And I apologize. I say, I am so sorry. I fell down this elevator. I'm trying to pull myself out. There's no way. You may have to come down and get me. I really apologize. I fell like 8 feet. No big deal. And he looks at me with that same slightly smug look. And he says, no, buddy, you fell about 20 feet down there. And that's when it hits me. And I start to shake a little bit on my unsteady feet. And he says, don't worry, buddy, we'll get you out of there. And I don't know how they're going to do this. Well, it turns out there was a basement apartment. And so these poor people got roused at 4 a.m. And about 5 feet above, they pry open the elevator doors to their unit. And they bring down this board, and they all pile in with me into this pit. And they strap me to this board because they assume that my neck is, just broken, that I'm destroyed. But I know that I'm not. I feel like I'd just taken a terrible beating, but I feel fine, and I know that I should not feel fine. I know I should be dead at the bottom of this pit. But I'm not. I hate to admit it because I'm generally a very positive person, but all that time in that horrible job, I began to feel not just helpless or powerless, but I had begun to fear what it was like to be already dead. And I felt this is what it's like to be already dead. What I'm doing doesn't matter. And I was so happy to discover that I was not.
So about 12 years ago, I'm an English as a second language teacher, and I give lessons in my apartment. And one day this woman comes in, this Peruvian woman named Angela, and she's just a vision. She's got dark skin and dark curly hair, and she's wearing a bandana, and she has crooked teeth, something I've always found irresistible in women. And I'm immediately smitten with her. And she starts taking lessons, and as the weeks go on, I become more and more attracted to her. And one day, in a fit of courage, I ask her out, and she says yes. And we start going out, and we start dating, and we fall in love. And it's just this beautiful, magical summer romance. And I'm so happy, and I'm certain I've never met anyone that I've loved more, or a situation that's more perfect for me. And a few weeks into our relationship, we're planning to go away for the weekend. And the night before we're planning to go away, I have a friend's bachelor party. So I go to my friend's bachelor party, and I want to be a good boyfriend, and I want to be in good shape for when we go away the next day, so I don't drink very much, and there's drugs there, and I don't do any drugs, and I want to make sure that I'm a good boyfriend and that I'm responsible. I still stay up all night because it's a friend's bachelor party, and I have not responsibilities, but a commitment to my friend to at least help him have a good time on this evening. So I get home early in the morning, and I want to get a couple of hours sleep before it's time for Angela and I to go away for the weekend. And she calls me early in the morning, and she can tell that I'm exhausted. I'm really tired. And she says to me, if you're really tired, you can sleep and we can go away another weekend. And I'm like, thank you. Yes, can we please do that? That would be amazing. I'm just too tired to drive anywhere. And I'm thinking, not only am I the perfect boyfriend, but she's the perfect girlfriend. She really gets me. We have this symbiotic relationship where we just work together, and she fully understands me, and it's wonderful. So I have peaceful sleep. I wake up, and I call her later in the day, and she says, I don't want to talk to you, and hangs up the phone. And I'm like, fuck. She seemed so cool with it. And so I call her back a few times, and she keeps hanging up on me. And I can't take it because when people are upset with me, I feel like it's always my fault. It's 100% my fault. And this enormous sense of guilt comes over me. So I have to take care of this situation right away. So I hop in my car, and I drive to her house, and I see her on the way on her bike. And I put my window down, and I say, Angela, and she ignores me. She's like, I'm not even there. And this is like the most painful moment of my life. It's like this woman that I'm in love with is completely ignoring me, and I'm yelling her name, and she just bikes away. So she ignores me for 2 days, and I'm in just a state of total agitation because I'm sure that I've done something to fuck up this relationship. It's all my fault. I take it all on myself. This goes on for a couple of days, and then we make up, and things continue. Things get more intense. But as the relationship goes on, she starts to get angrier and angrier about things that I do, where it gets to the point where about once every 2 weeks, she explodes in a fit of rage over something I'd done. And her anger was really getting to be a little bit too much for me. And one day I tried to break up with her, and I went to her house, and I tried to break up with her, and she was yelling, and I couldn't take it, so I ran out of her house, and she was following me. And I'm walking back to my apartment, and I had told her previously that my dad used to yell at me when I was a kid, and it scared me. So she was up in my face saying do I scare you? Do I scare you like your father used to scare you? And I'm like, no, this is much scarier than anything my father ever did. And she's just following me, and I go back to my apartment, and I don't want to let her in my apartment because I'm afraid of her. So I circle around the block a few times, and she's just following me and in my face, do I scare you? Do I scare you? I'm like, yes, what more do you want me to say? So that I can't get rid of her. So I go into my apartment, and she muscles her way into my apartment, and we're still arguing. She pours a glass of orange juice over my head. It's a big mess. So this is the kind of madness that our relationship had descended into. Around the same time, I had a giant plantar wart at the bottom of my foot. And I would go to the dermatologist once every 2 weeks where he would spray the wart with liquid nitrogen. And has anyone ever had liquid nitrogen treatments on a wart? I guess you don't want to admit it. Don't yell it. No, never mind. The person next to you doesn't want to know. But the way it works is it doesn't hurt at first, the first treatment, because warts are they have a tough exterior. But as it gets deeper and deeper into the wart, as the treatments go on, it starts to hurt more and more until it's this excruciating stinging pain that lasts for a few hours after each treatment. So my life at the time was punctuated by this bi-weekly emotional pain where Angela would just yell at me and get angry at me, and this bi-weekly physical pain where the dermatologist would spray my foot with liquid nitrogen. And for me, I kind of thought that the wart was some kind of physical manifestation of how shitty a person I was, that I was doing something to make Angela angry, so this was being paid back on me with the wart on my foot. And they had appeared, like our first fight and the wart had appeared around the same time. So it was very clear what I had to do. I had to break up with Angela. I had to get out of this relationship. And there was also some kind of belief that if I broke up with Angela, the wart would disappear also. This is the way my mind works. So I planned to break up with her. I invited her over to my apartment, which is obviously the worst place to break up with somebody because you can't leave. So I invited her over to my apartment, and I poured her a nice glass of orange, raspberry, and passion fruit juice, and I started to do it like as passively and as softly as I can. And I'm like, Angela, I'm not really happy. She's like, why are you not happy? And I'm like, well, we fight all the time. And she's like, yeah, we do, but there's a lot of good stuff in our relationship too. And I'm like, wouldn't you be happier if we weren't together? The most passive way you can break up with someone. No. I wouldn't be happier if we weren't together. So this goes on for like an hour, this back and forth, where we're not getting anywhere, and I'm losing ground. So I figure I need to take it to a new level. So I look her in the eyes and I say, Angela, I'm not in love with you anymore. Well, that does it, because she grabs some CDs from the rack next to her and starts throwing them against the wall. And then she takes her glass of juice and launches it across the room, where it shatters against the left speaker, splattering glass and juice everywhere. And why the fuck do I keep giving her juice? I feel like juice is some kind of soothing drink to give to people when they're upset. Like, it's part of my Jewish nature to make people feel calm at all moments. And then she starts punching and kicking me, and she's small, but her anger makes her strong, and I'm batting away her fists and her legs, and I don't want to hit her back, but I don't know what to do, so I say, get the fuck out of here. Which is bad, because I wanted like a perfect, beautiful breakup, and then one of the last things I'm going to say to her is, get the fuck out of here. And she runs to the table in the hall and grabs the keys, and then runs to my bedroom and belly flops down on the bed with my keys trapped underneath her, and I'm trying to wrestle them away from her, and I can't get them away from her, and finally I'm just like, Angela, we need to get out of here. Like, let's go to a cafe and talk. We just need to leave the apartment. As soon as we're outside and I lock the door, I run. I just bolt. I run away, and it's a snowstorm, and I pull away in my car in the snowstorm with her like chasing me like a film. And I go to my friend's house, and I'm in a state. I'm like shaking, and I'm all fucked up. And my friends are like, my friend and his, if she's hitting you, probably made the right choice in breaking up with her. And that makes me feel better. And then the next morning, I find little torn pieces of photographs of us embedded in the snow all over my car. Breakup confetti. And that makes me feel even better that I've made the right choice. And I'm certain that with Angela out of my life, the wart will disappear, and my body will return to its pristine state of youthful perfection. Which is not what happens. About 3 weeks after breaking up with Angela, I slip on some ice snowboarding at Jay Peak, and my thumb bends backwards. I know there's a problem when I can't roll a joint on the car ride home. After a 14-hour emergency room visit, I leave the Montreal General with a broken thumb and a honking cast on my arm. About 4 weeks after breaking up with Angela, I get my 3 front teeth replaced with fake ones. I knew I'd had to get one of them replaced because it had no root, a result of a previous medical condition, and the dentist said he would have to do a little filing of the 2 healthy teeth next to the problem one. And after he did the little filing and went to fetch the temporary bridge, I saw that what he meant by a little filing was shaving the healthy teeth down to little nubs to serve as anchors for the bridge. I rubbed my tongue on them, and they were like sharp little chiclets. They weren't teeth anymore. I looked in the mirror. I looked like an old man without his dentures. I stood in front of the mirror that night, and I looked at the bridge. It wasn't the right size. It was a temporary bridge. It wasn't the permanent one, but it wasn't the right size. And it was 27, and I had fake buck teeth. My cast itched. And the bottom of my foot burned from the previous day's nitrogen blast. Things couldn't get any worse. And that's when Angela calls. I'm coming to pick up my bike, she says, and slams the phone down. I'm terrified. There's no way that I could face her in my state. What if she punches me in my bridge? It was very expensive. And what if she breaks my cast? It was 14 hours in the emergency room. So I don't know what to do. And then I get an idea. So I take her bike and I leave it in the lobby of with a note saying I'd had to run out. I was very proud of this plan. There was a chance someone might steal it, but that was a chance I was willing to take. And then I go in my bedroom, and I go in my apartment, I turn off all the lights, and I sit in the middle of the living room, far away from the windows with the lights off, just terrified of moving. And so about an hour later, the buzzer from downstairs starts buzzing, and it doesn't stop, and I'm like, shit, she didn't buy my ruse that I wasn't home. And she just, it's like a constant buzz for like half an hour, and I'm just sitting in the apartment, terrified to move. I called my friend. I think my friend found it funny. I was scared. And so I'm just sitting there, like this buzzing is invading my brain. And then finally it stops, and I wait a few minutes, and then I crawl over to the window, and I look outside, and there's Angela in the middle of the street, just looking up at my window, and our eyes meet. Busted. So I have to go downstairs to face her, and my heart's pounding, and I go downstairs in the lobby, and she's like, somebody could have stolen my bike. And I'm like, I'm afraid of you. I just spent 14 hours in the emergency room. And sure enough, she comes up to me and starts hitting me in the chest. And I just run outside, and I run down the street and around the corner and into the police station. What am I doing in the police station? I'm shaking, and I'm numb, and I can't speak. And I say to the policewoman behind the counter, my ex-girlfriend is hitting me. The policewoman's sitting back in her chair with her feet up on her desk, bored. Like, this happens 10 times a night. And she's like, do you want to press charges? No, I don't want to press charges. No, there's nothing we can do. Okay. Thanks, police. So I leave the police station, and I go back to my apartment, and Angela's there. And when I tell her where I've been, she's like, I can't get arrested. I'm applying for my citizenship. Well, don't go around hitting people. And she starts crying, and I say, look, let's just go for a coffee and talk about it. That coffee I said we would go for, that we never did. So we go to the cafe, and things calm down in the cafe, and I apologize for the way things ended, and she asked me what happened to my thumb, and she tells me she started swing dancing, and we even manage a few laughs. I'd like to sleep over, she says. She starts crying and telling me how much she misses me and how much she wants to sleep in my arms. Now, you'd think this would be an easy decision. I was just cowering in fear of her in my apartment, but I was tempted. And, you know, her face was puffy from the tears, and she was a mess, and she was wearing a sweater vest with orange track pants. But she was cute, and I was still attracted to her. And besides that, when we'd been together, I'd been as attracted to the madness and the emotional abuse as her laugh or her smile. You know, we like to divide relationships into good and bad parts, but it's all part of the same package. And when you're in love, you're obsessed with all the parts of your relationship and the person. But I also felt in that moment that it wasn't all my fault. You know, I had been blaming myself entirely for everything that was happening, but I wasn't responsible for the way she felt, and the relationship, I was at most 50% responsible, maybe less. And so I kind of forgave myself a little, and I said, no, I don't think that's a good idea. In the weeks that followed, or the months that followed, my thumb healed, and I got my permanent bridge, and it looked good. It looked better than my original teeth. The wart went away, came back, went away, came back. Finally, it went away for good. And my dermatologist praised my tenacity in sticking out the treatments. He said, most people just let their warts go on forever. I thought that was an apropos metaphor for my relationship with Angela. But once I realized that it's not all my fault, and I can't be responsible for how other people feel, and there was two people in this relationship, not just me. Once I forgave myself, the wart went away, and it never came back. Thank you.
So it was early 2009. I was 17 years old, and I was a fresh high school dropout. And I spent most of my time working at this restaurant as a host. And so every morning I would do the same thing, kind of get ready, smoke a little weed, go to work. This one morning, I get a phone call, and it's from my mother. And she says, "Son, it's Mommy. I need you to come up to my work whenever you get off." It's like, "What's up? What's going on?" She goes, "It doesn't matter. I just need you to come up here as soon as you can." So I go to work, I get off, and I arrive at her work, and she works at this place called the Park Ventura Endoscopy Center. So it's an endoscopy center. They do endoscopies. They stick hoses in your, they stick them in your butt and down your throat so that they can check you for cancer and other tumors and things like that. And so she worked as a post-op, pre-op nurse. And so she spent all of her time going around to all these patients, and she would sing to them, and she was the best nurse there, and everybody loved her, and all the people that worked there just absolutely loved her. And so I got to walk in, and I see her there, and she's singing to her patients, which is totally normal thing for her. And she says, "I need you to go into the back room and wait for me there." So I go into the back, and she comes in, and she shuts the door, and she sits down, and she looks me in the face, and she says, "I know that there's a plot out to kill me, and I know that you're involved, and I want you to admit to it." So how did we get here? This is pretty extreme. It started earlier in 2008, just after Thanksgiving. She started exhibiting some very strange behavior, kind of misplacing things, but was actually sure that somebody had taken them. And then one day she comes to me and she says, "Hey, I came home and I found leaves in my bed." I'm not really sure what that was all about. And she said, "I think it's somebody trying to send me a message saying that you're going to be sleeping under the leaves soon, as in under the ground, dead." I was like, "Okay, Mom, like that's a little bit weird, but it's whatever. Sure, that's happening. Okay, we're just gonna move on." And she, got a little pissy about it and continued on. And then the next day when I came home, I found leaves in my bed. And it was like, what the fuck is going on? I don't understand. So I pick up the leaves and I throw them outside, and I go to my mom and I'm like, "Hey, Mom, I found leaves in my bed." And she goes, "I don't know what you're talking about." I'm like, okay, we're gonna continue moving forward here. Her behavior starts to get worse and worse, and one night she busts into my room at 3 o'clock in the morning, practically kicks the door in, and she's in an absolute frenzy. She's just like, "Oh my God, I don't know, something's happening to me." And I was like, "What?" I'm trying to sleep, and I'm 17, and I care more about that than anything else. So I'm like, "Just God, Mom, shut up and leave my room. I'm trying to sleep." She ended up storming out with a, "Oh, you don't even care." Slam the door. So I didn't know what was going on until I noticed that she started carrying knives sticking out of her purse. And she would carry them everywhere that she went, just, sticking right up out of the top of her purse. Pointy end out. Not the other end out, the pointy end out, And I asked her about it, and she goes, "Well, in case anybody decides to come after me, I want them to know that I have a knife." I'm like, "Okay, Mom, I don't really know what's happening here. I don't know what's going through your head, but, I'm just gonna kind of continue on." And I started sleeping with my door locked. So now I'm sitting across the desk from her, and she's telling me, "Yes, I know that there's a plot out to kill me, and I know that you're involved, and I want you to admit to it." So all of the previous behavior is starting to kind of come together, and I don't know if she's joking. I don't know if she's telling the truth. I just tell her that she's crazy. I said, "Mom, you're crazy. None of this is actually happening. I don't know why you think this is happening, but it's not." She reaches into her purse, and she pulls out a piece of paper, and on the piece of paper, it's an admissions warrant for me. And it's admitting me to the Timberlawn Psychiatric Center in downtown Dallas. And it's signed by a judge, the same judge that signed off on me dropping out of school. It says that she's admitting me because I'm plotting to kill her. And she puts it in front of me and she goes, "If you don't admit to this, then I'm gonna have you committed." So I'm 17, stuck between a very big rock and a hard place, and I have a choice. I can tell her the truth, that she's crazy, she'll think it's a lie, and I'll end up getting put away, and I don't know what's gonna happen to me after that. Or I can tell her what she wants to hear, and maybe I can save my own skin. So I said, yes, there are people trying to kill you. And she's just, oh, yes, yes. Like you could see like just her eyes open up like she was so relieved to hear it. And she goes, it's your father and your sister, right? Sure, it's them. It's everybody that you think it is. It's me, it's Dad, it's Emma. We're all plotting to kill you. This is actually happening. She says, that's all I need to hear. And she grabs me by the hand and she drags me into her boss's office. And she yells at her boss. She goes, he admitted to everything. Call the police. And she turns around and she grabs me in her arms. And it's like I'm sitting here holding her. And she's just crying and crying and crying. And I look at her boss who's sitting there at the table and she doesn't know what to do. Very obviously does not know what to do. And I kind of have to look at her and I say, call the police right now. Something needs to be done. I don't care who it is that they come and get, but the police need to come here now. So she calls the police. I was so traumatized by the event that whenever the police got there and they separated me from my mother, they were asking me what was happening, and it was kind of a mixture of what she wanted me to admit to, like the plot to kill her, along with she's the one who's really crazy, please save me. So they take me away. I'm put in handcuffs and they escort me to what's known as Green Oaks. I'm put under a 24-hour watch, protection from everybody, and the nurses try to kind of coax the story, the real story out of me. They're saying, you know, what's going on with your mother? Why don't you tell us the truth? And I was so afraid of her and what she would possibly do if I told the truth. From there, I was transferred to the C Center, which is a safe place for teens, mainly for teenagers whose parents don't know how to deal with them anymore. And I spent the next week in this facility, and I wasn't sure if the doctors at Green Oaks just forgot to tell them, but I spent the next week in that facility trying to convince these doctors that I was not the one who was crazy, but that she was the one who was crazy. And it's really hard to do that when they're pretty sure that you're the one who's crazy and you're the one who's in the nut house. My final day, I get called by my psychiatrist for a meeting. And as I walk up to the room, I see my mother storm out of the office, and I try to reach out to her. And she just continues on. And I go inside the room and I sit down, and my psychiatrist says, you ever heard of the phrase CTD? I'm 17. I don't know what this means. He says, it's called circling the drain. That's a mental health term we like to have around here for people like your mother. Your mother is not doing well. You need to get as far away from her as you possibly can. She is a threat to herself, others, and you. Do you have anywhere else safe that you can go? I didn't have any way to contact my father and my sister. I didn't really have a way to contact anybody. So I told the doctor no. And the next day, they released me back into her care. Within an hour, I'd gotten away from her. And it took a lot of work, but I managed to pull myself up after a few weeks of hopping from friend's house to friend's house, only being able to stay there a couple of nights because they were worried that my mother was going to show up. I finally arrived where my father lived on the other side of Texas, in Midland, Texas, on March the 7th, 2009. 3 days later, on March the 10th, I get pulled into my grandparents' living room where I see my sister and my entire father's side of the family sitting there. And they sit me and my sister down, and my sister instantly just grabs my hand like she knows that something's going on. And my father says, your mother killed herself. 3 days after I had left. I remember my grandmother trying to hold me, and I pushed her away. And I ran into the back room, and really all I wanted to do was just shove my head through a wall, because I was right there. I was right there the whole time. I could have been there. If I had known, I could have done something. So I had this tremendous amount of guilt that just started to eat me alive on the inside. It wasn't until later that I discovered that my mother had been diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic. My mother's side of the family had known for a while that she had been a little on the edge, but decided that it was safer for us to just stay with her and they could watch at a distance. But you saw how that turned out. So I can say that finding out why she committed suicide was because of my mother's illness. It really definitely helped soften the blow. But it was that knowing all she needed was those words. All she needed was just somebody to confirm for her that, yes, there were people trying to kill her. And that's all it took for her to go downhill. It's a little easier to deal with knowing her disease, but it still hurts to know that I lied just to save my own skin. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much, and thank you, Kevin, for that very nice intro. And it's been a couple years that we've been trying to find a date. It's really nuts. I've always felt bad, but I'm so glad to be here and finally be a part of this. This is nice, and especially this topic. This one's like, panic is like very near to my heart. I will not say near and dear to my heart. It is not dear to my heart in any way. It has plagued me since I was about 12 or 13. That's when I really started suffering, is the only way to say it, from depression, real depression. And that depression would often express itself in panic attacks. It was a thing that I didn't know what it was, and I didn't really tell anybody about it for about 10 years, but it's a thing that happened. And for me, I think for everybody they're different, and even for me they're different every time, but some of the things that I know are my face gets very hot, it goes numb like pins and needles. I can't even take a breath, and I will usually wind up lying on the ground and crying, and they affect my life for like weeks afterwards. It's just really horrible. And that started, when I was a kid. And you guys don't have to worry. I'm very comfortable talking about it. I see a shrink now. I work on it. I work very hard. I've seen a few shrinks over the years. My first guy, very standard, by the book, played by the rules, did everything the correct way, and that didn't work for me at all. And now I see a lady who's the opposite. I don't know if she's even aware there are rules, but she doesn't play by them, not by a long shot. She's like a tough-talking, foul-mouthed broad who grew up in Jersey. I love her. I get her. I understand her. She once spent a whole session sitting on the couch with me, showing me pictures on an iPad of a house she bought in Mexico. The insurance does not cover this. I paid her cash, $175, to show me pictures of a Mexican house. This is also how she told me that she was moving to Mexico. That's how she informed me. All of our sessions are now via Skype. She's come to see me in shows, and that's like a nice thing, but you have to remember, this is my workplace. This is my job. You wouldn't want your shrink hanging out in your workplace, but it's debatable because what I do is public performance, so it's on the border. Here's a thing that's not debatable. She once came and saw me in a show, and my parents also attended it. And they lived near each other in New Jersey at the time. And she asked them for a ride home, and they gave it to her. That's not okay. If you're not familiar with how mental health doctoring works, it should never end up with your shrink and your parents alone in a car. Should not happen. There's no conceivable reality where that's how it ends. Is that it makes no sense. But I love her, even though she's crazy, and even though she ignores the rules, and even though I probably know more about her than she knows about me, even though we've been working together since 2007. I love her, and she does a lot for me. And for example, she once said 6 words that I think kept me alive. In June of 2012, we'd been seeing each other for 5 years at that point. And I'd been sober for 10 years at that point. And then I got booked to do a show at a music festival called Bonnaroo. And some people are chuckling because they've clearly been, and they know that drugs flow freely at Bonnaroo. And it had been 10 years, and I thought I could get away with it. And what happened was I realized that I have an addictive personality. Even if I managed to control it for 10 years, it didn't go away. And I learned that when I did $300 worth of MDMA in 36 hours. Which is not even how MDMA works. I later looked it up and I realized I was just basically hammering my brain with chemicals that were having no effect. And it fucked my life up. It messed my life up for a good summer. The whole summer of 2012 was spent recovering from that. I came home from Bonner. I broke up with a girl who I'd been dating for 8 years. I had the same roommate for 10 years. I just moved out, no notice. I just left. And I started acting crazy, man. I was like, partying all the time in New York, staying up all night, sleeping with tons of girls, which I don't get how I pulled it off either. I think what I learned that summer was looking like a member of Weezer goes further in New York than I knew. It goes a long way. It goes a long way. And it was really nuts. It was really insane. And I didn't tell my shrink the full extent of it. I told her I did some drugs. She asked me if I was okay, and I said yes, and that was just a lie. It was not true, and I hid it, and that's not a cool thing for me to do. And in the midst of that summer, while she didn't realize how much I was reeling, she said, I think you might have some ADD type stuff, and maybe that's something that helps lead to your panic attacks. Maybe the fact that you have that anxiety is getting you there. So maybe we treat you for ADD, and then we can cut your panic attacks off at the pass instead of dealing with the aftermath of them. And she said, I think we should put you on Adderall. And I was like, yeah, we should do that. We should absolutely do that. Because I didn't know much about Adderall, but I hear you can abuse it, and that was the mood I was in that summer. And Adderall is a type of methamphetamine. I don't know if it's methamphetamine. It's an amphetamine, but it's close enough. I became a meth head instantly. I was eating 60 milligrams of Adderall before noon every day and just going nuts. That's crazy. Everybody who just said, wow, is either a medical professional or prescribed or a college student currently. Because that's a lot of fucking Adderall. And I started getting all these crazy things happening. My muscles were twitching, and I'd be dehydrated constantly. I was extraordinarily productive, I will say that. Anything that happened to me in the summer of 2012, physically, any weird thing that happened to me, if I Googled Adderall, the thing that was happening, hundreds of message board posts would come up. Adderall, can't get a boner, yup. Adderall can get a boner never goes away. Yup. Adderall, get a boner, and the boner's working fine, and then the boner just deflates like a balloon. Yup. All the time. Adderall, shitting blood. Yup. Adderall can make some people so tense inside that it gives you internal hemorrhoids, and when the internal hemorrhoids tear, you shit a lot of bright red blood. And that was happening to me. Funny side note to this story, this took place in 2012. About 3 months ago, my wife was like, why is there always blood on our sheets? And I was like, oh, because I shit blood. And she was like, how long has this been going on? And I was like, since 2012. And she was like, what? And I was like, yeah, I think maybe it'll clear up on its own. And she's like, go see a fucking doctor. Go see a doctor. You're ruining our sheets. And I did. I got a surgery from this guy. His name is Dr. Rabin Rahmani. He's in South Williamsburg. If you need a guy, he's great. He's awesome. He was super cool. He was super chill. Anyway, this summer was insane. As you can tell, I'm making jokes, but you can all tell I'm making jokes to mask the seriousness of that summer. It was foundationless is how I always describe it. It was scary. It was really scary. And I was doing tons of shows that whole summer because I started performing comedy in New York when I was 19 years old. I grew up on stage. It's where I'm most comfortable. This right now is the most confident and social you will ever see me. Even backstage, the other comedians will tell you I've largely sat in a corner fearful of them the whole night. But here I feel comfortable. And when you're a performer and you're performing, you're in control. I get to tell you guys my version of the story, and it feels good. And every time you guys laugh, it means that you understand in some way. And I feel less alone. And in that summer in particular, that meant a lot. When I say a joke and you guys laugh, I feel like we're connecting and we're coming together as a community. And that's why I think every theater is secretly a church, which is a very pretentious thing to tell you guys right after I talked about shitting blood. I know that. I understand that. But I was doing shows all the time, and one Sunday night, I was doing a show a few blocks west of here at the Upright Citizens Brigade. And it was the Sunday night show called Ask Cat. It's been running for about 20 years, and I'd done that show for many, many years. I was like in charge of booking that show for many years. It was safe territory for me. And that show, it's interesting. Like a lot of really great improvisers will come and do that show, and some of them are famous people, and they come back and drop in. But it's actually really bad improv. It's great people doing shitty work because people fuck around. They mess with each other, sell each other out, make fun of each other on stage, like pull the rug out from under each other. It's like everybody messes with each other. It's part of the deal with that show, and I'm letting you know that because someone said something about me that was a joke, and it was a joke that had been said many times before, and every other time I would just make fun of whoever said it back. And even this person, this was a great friend of mine for 10 years, he said this thing, and I'm telling you that because this is how this show worked. He wasn't malicious. What happened was I was in the middle of an improv scene, and I said a line, and the guy on stage with me went, "Well, at least I can straighten my arms." And what he was referring to was this: that's as straight as my elbow goes. This one goes out at a different angle, and my hands, you can see my hands are weird. I can't really bend them. My knees are messed up. It's part of why my forehead's so big. And it's this thing that my mom had. She passed it on to me, and it turned into this really nasty rheumatoid arthritis. And for me, it's only going to get worse as I get older. And he said it. And for some reason on that night, I mean, that joke had been made 99 times before, and I would just make fun of the person back, whoever said it. And this was the 100th time, and I just felt my breath go, and my face got hot, and the pins and needles started. And right on the other side of the person who said it, very good, one of my oldest friends in the world, a comedian named Shannon O'Neill, she's sitting in a chair, and she looked at me and saw my face, and I realized, like, oh no, she sees it. She sees it. Everybody could see it. And it was a sold-out crowd that night, probably close to 200 people, and all I could think was, like, 200 people are about to see me have a panic attack on stage. That's never happened before. And I didn't know what to do. Because in my mind, I'm like, there's 200 people looking, not just looking at me, they're looking at this thing that I think is this really hideous thing about myself. And I can feel it, and I feel so naked and alone, and I didn't know what to do. So I just turned around and I just walked off stage, just in the middle of a scene. I was like, and just left. And a lot of times I'll tell this story and people are like, oh, who said that to you? And I don't, it's gossipy and I don't think it's important, so I'll just move on. I'll give you one hint and let you know he played Kenneth the Page on 30 Rock. And I walked off stage and Jack McBrayer followed me and he was upset. And understandably so, he was behind me. We were walking backstage towards the green room, and he's behind me. He's like, dude, what are you doing? You walk off stage, you make me look like such an asshole. That's the show. Like, that's what the show is. And he was totally right. That's the social contract of the show. You mess with each other. He's like, we both look like, you look like a crazy person. I look like an asshole. And he's like kind of yelling at me, and we're in the green room, and my back was still to him. And then I turned around, and as soon as I turned around, I didn't even say a word. He saw me, and he went, I didn't know. I didn't know, because my eyes were just dead and there were tears, and he could just see it, that I was just gone. I was just gone. And he put his hands up. I'll never forget. He went, I didn't know. And I just went, it's been a really bad summer, Jack. It's been a really bad summer. And I pushed past him and I left. And I went out the back entrance of UCB, and then there was another show. They do 2 shows a night on Sundays, and I'd been doing that show for years, and there's all these people who come every week, and I just ran past all of them crying, and you could see some of them were like, oh, I guess Gether's not doing the 9:30, like, you could see it, and I didn't know what to do. I was totally panicking, completely panicking, and I got in my car, and I started driving. And I didn't know where to go, and I just started making random turns, and then next thing I know, I realized I was going through the Lincoln Tunnel. because I grew up in New Jersey. I live in Brooklyn now, but I grew up in New Jersey. It feels really safe to me. So in my freak out, I was like, Jersey, I'm in the tunnel. And I didn't know what to do. And I was in my head, I'm like, my internal monologue just gets so out of control during these attacks. And in my head, I'm like, maybe I should drive to my parents' house. I'll drive to my parents' house. I'll be okay there. And then I'm like, no, because if I show up in the middle of the night at my parents' house like this, they're going to put me in a mental hospital. They're gonna we had talked during previous incidents about how maybe that would be a good idea, and I didn't want that. And then it started getting really dark. And to me, one of the scariest things about being mentally ill is when I'm thinking crazy things, but I'm not yet crazy enough that I don't understand that they're not crazy. You know what I mean? Where I can hear myself think something and be like, that's fucked up, but I mean it. So like in my head, I was like, what I should do is I should get a whole bunch of fucking whiskey and I should get a hotel room and I should throw my phone away and I should just fucking chill out and see what happens. And then in my head, I'm like, that's not a good idea. And then in my head, I'm like, that's why I should do it. It was really fucked up and dark. It was really bad. And I'm making all these turns and I'm hearing those things and I'm scaring myself. My own internal monologue is causing me fear and it's getting more out of control. And I'm making random turns. And the next thing I know, I'm in Weehawken. I don't know why. I don't know anybody in Weehawken. I have no connection to Weehawken, but I am in Weehawken. And I start walking along the cliffs above the Hudson River, and I'm thinking to myself, I wonder if this is high enough that if I jump, I'll die. And again, I'm not going to, but I hear myself thinking it, and I realize I can't stop thinking that. It's out of control. And I don't know how to catch my own thoughts, if that makes sense. And I sit on this bench, because Weehawken, those cliffs are right over the Hudson. It's the most beautiful view of the city you'll ever see. I actually, will say, I think it's one of the best kept secrets in the New York area. They have these little buses from Port Authority, couple bucks, you run out there, cheap date, beautiful view, you blow somebody's mind with it, do it. Don't tell them you heard about it in a suicide-related story, but just go out there, it's beautiful. And I was sitting on this bench and I was crying for a long time, just kind of heaving, crying. And part of why I know it's a great date spot is because these two couples walked by, and they were clearly on a double date. They were two Hispanic couples. They were really beautiful people. They were all good looking, and it was very much clearly a double date. And they were joking and laughing, and they were walking right by me. And then I was sitting on a bench, and one of the couples sat here, and the other couple sat here. And they were talking and joking and laughing, and no one acknowledged the crying 32-year-old white guy on the middle of the bench. It made no sense, and I was looking at them and crying, and they just were looking at each other. No one made eye contact with me. And in my head I went, I get what's going on. I'm dead. I'm a ghost. They can't see me. That's what happens to me. I'm the ghost of Weehawken. My destiny is I haunt Weehawken forever. It could be worse. It could be Union City or North Bergen. There's worse towns in Hudson County. This is okay, you know? And I got up and I just started wandering around Weehawken crying, convinced I was a ghost and no one could see me. And at one point I just threw open the doors to this steakhouse, this fancy steakhouse up on the cliffs, and I just walked in and crying. I started just walking up to tables and looking and seeing what people were eating. And in my head, I wasn't saying any of this, I was thinking it, walking up to a table and being you're eating a burger at a steakhouse? Grow up. Oh, scallops, nice scallops, steakhouse choice, good. But I'm not actually saying any of that. So all the people in this restaurant just see a crying man going, just wandering around, and then I just left. And at one point, these cliffs, they have all these inclines, these things you can walk up. And I found myself at the bottom of one, and I was walking up it, and things were getting really bad. And really, as you can tell, but really out of control. And I'm walking up this incline, and I stop because there's graffiti stenciled on this concrete pathway. And it says, "What are you doing here?" And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, that's completely bizarre. And I walk up a little further, and there's another one stenciled. And it says, "Maybe things can change." And I was like, well, this is really crazy. And I felt myself calming down, and I walked up a little further, and there was another one that said, "Tomorrow could be different." And in my head, I'm like, this is beautiful. What a beautiful moment. Some artist put this here, and he or she didn't know if anyone was going to find it. Not only did someone find it before it got removed, I found it when I'm like this. Like, that's what art is for. You send a message out in the world. You hope somebody receives it. And I received it, and I was feeling such, like, euphoria. And I got to the top of the hill. I was almost running to see if there were more. And there was one more, and it said www.godaddy.com. And I was like, of course. Of course, GoDaddy is the type of company doing shitty hipster advertising in Weehawken. Of course. And all the euphoria just left. I felt more betrayed than ever by life, by the life around me. And I kept walking around for a while, and I wound up back at my crying bench, which at this point I had spent enough time on it crying that it was certifiably my crying bench. And I sat there crying for a long time, and I didn't know what to do. Eventually I took out my phone, and real late on a Sunday night I called my shrink. And she picked up, and she was like, "You never call me off hours. What's going on?" I said, I think I'm a ghost in Weehawken, and I was going to get whiskey, and my elbows are broken, and I'm ugly, and I'm losing it, and I can't really calm down. I don't know what's going on. She said, okay. She goes, "Look, I got a couple questions for you." She goes, "First, before I even get into that," she goes, "I'll tell you right now, you don't sound crazy." And that meant a lot to me. Because I don't, it's scary. It's scary to realize you're going crazy. So for someone who knows me to say that, it meant a lot. And she goes, "Let me ask you this, like, compared to a couple hours ago, you think you're headed in the right direction or the wrong direction?" And I sat and I thought about it. I said, I feel awful. I feel really awful, and I'm really scared. But I got to say, I feel a little less scared than an hour ago if I'm thinking objectively. And she goes, "Well, that's a good sign, right?" And I go, "Yeah." And she goes, "Well, it's a good sign that you called me, isn't it?" And I said, "It is. It is." And she paused, and then she goes, "Honestly, we'll talk about it on Thursday." And she said that, and those were the 6 words that I think kept me alive. "We'll talk about it on Thursday." Because it hit me. It's late on a Sunday. It's pretty much Monday. I can stay alive till Thursday. I can do that. When you put it like that, that's simple enough. I can do that. And my guess is that that's not the way a doctor should behave. If a client calls you in the middle of the night and is like, "I'm a ghost and I want to jump off cliffs," you shouldn't be like, "Cool, Thursday it is." I imagine that that's not the correct thing to do. But that's what she said, and it worked for me. And I have talked openly about the fact that I suffer from this stuff on stage sometimes, and it's always in the service of comedy. I turn stories into jokes. That's what I do. And I wound up writing a little bit about it online as well, and it kind of went viral. I sort of unintentionally became like an advocate for mental health awareness, which I did not expect, but I don't mind, because people say it helps, and I'm happy to help. But people ask me for advice. And sometimes people will be like, "I suffer, and I'm depressed and scared. I don't know what to do. What do I do?" And I always say, "I don't know. I am not a professional, and it's not even like I can pass on advice from my shrink, because she's not really a professional either." Like, if I was going to tell you something she told me in good conscience, I'd have to be like, "My buddy once told me this thing." Like, that's as far as I could take it. But what I can say to those people is, you have your Thursday. You have your thing that's not unattainable. For me, that was actually Thursday. Maybe that's what it is for you, but maybe your version of Thursday is the person you feel comfortable opening up to, or a place where you feel safe. But it's out there, and it's not that far away, because I found mine, and I'm not very strong. So I bet you can do it too. But I can give some advice to the people who are on the other side of the fence, which I get a lot of people going, "My mom, my roommate, my friend is suffering, and I don't know how to deal with it. How can I help them?" And for that, I can give you some advice that I learned by an example that was set, which was, you can be like my old shrinks who used to do everything by the book, who worried about making sure everything they did was correct. Or you can be like my new shrink, who doesn't worry at all about what's correct, but really worries about doing what's right, who really is willing to pick up the phone, even if she's probably not supposed to. And she did that for me. And it's part of why I love her, and it's part of why I'll always love her. Even though she once told me in the 70s, she starred in a series of pornographic films. Thank you guys so much.
I have a recurring nightmare about delivering pizzas. It's late at night. It's really hot outside. And I have this really bad feeling in my gut that something terrible is about to happen. And before I started having this dream, I actually did deliver pizzas. It's the summer of 2011, and I was about to graduate from Auburn University, and I took this job delivering pizzas in Opelika, Alabama, which is the town over, and I had this nervous feeling about delivering pizzas. And I'm kind of a nervous person anyway, but I had this bad feeling because, sometimes you have to go to areas that are not that great, and you have to deal with kind of sketchy people. I delivered to a guy one time who didn't bother to take his crack pipe off the table where he had his pizza money. But I'm always kind of nervous, and I've been that way since I was a little kid, and I don't want to let fear cripple me. So I try to push myself. So I take this job, and I was only about a month away from graduating from college, and I'd recently broken up with my childhood sweetheart, Charity. We'd broken up, and so I was in this weird transitional period. And on July 11th, 2011, I did not want to go to work. I had this really bad feeling that something bad was going to happen when I went to work. And I'm looking at myself in the mirror, and I'm thinking, just go. You're just being a baby. You get these bad feelings all the time, and nothing ever happens. Just go. Just go to work. And I get to work, and my fears are quickly validated. We're super busy, and on one of my early deliveries, I rear-end a lady. I hit her car, and luckily there was no damage done or anything like that. And so she didn't want to file a police report. So I get in the car, and my heart rate's going down. I think, I'm okay. I had this bad thing happen. Nothing bad came of it. Dinner rush is going to be over within an hour. I just got to make it through the day. You're on easy street now. About 8 o'clock that night, I get a phone call, and it's very weird. But you meet a lot of weird people delivering pizzas, like this guy, Mr. James. When I delivered to Mr. James, he's probably 70, 75 years old. And when he answers the door, he looks like he's cosplaying as Tom Cruise in Risky Business. He's wearing tube socks, and he's got on a dress shirt that's way too big for him, and he's not wearing pants. I hope he's wearing underwear. I can't tell. His shirt's too long, and he shuffles to the door, and he answers the door. Anchovies. Excuse me? Do you know what anchovies are? Well, yes, sir, but we don't get many requests for anchovies, so we actually don't have those as a topping for a pizza. I weep for you. So he gives me the money and he takes the pizza. So I get this call about 8 o'clock at night, and it's very weird. The guy says, "Hello, yes, my name is William Edward Johnson. I live at 1210 Zuber Street. It's a red house with a porch, and I'd like 2 pizzas. I'd like pepperoni and..." Whoa. Hold up just a second. You're going a little fast, and I'm like, why is this guy telling me about where he lives, and he's telling me his name? This is so odd. And I was like, Zuber Street? Is that even a real street? I've never heard of this place. I was like, how do you spell that? Zuber. It's like, okay, and I look on the map, and sure enough, it's a real place. And so I take his order, and it's kind of a large order, and I get off the phone with him, and I try to put the order through, and it won't go. And I look, and there's no phone number. And I think, Jesus Christ, did I delete the number? Like, the number goes into the computer automatically. And so I look at the caller ID on the phone next to me, and it's a blocked number. I think this is very odd. So I asked my manager, like, what do we do in this situation? I can't put the order through. I can't call him back. He says, well, he'll get upset that he hasn't received his food. He will call back and complain. We'll give him something for free, and you'll take the delivery. I'm like, okay. So I go out and I do a few more deliveries, and the whole time I'm doing it, I just have this sick feeling, and it's way worse than before I went to work that day. There's something that doesn't feel right about that order. And I think, please, Zuber Street, do not call back, please. And I'm not even listening to music. I'm just driving around, and I'm thinking, please don't call back. And I get back to the store, and sure enough, there's the 1210 Zuber Street order waiting on me. So I go there, and Zuber Street is really short. It's only about 500 yards long, and there are only 2 houses on the street. And there's a blue house on the left, and there's a red house on the right with a porch, just like the guy said. And then the road splits out into 2 separate roads right there where the 2 houses are. And I pull up, and there are 2 black kids sitting on the stoop. And I get out of the car, and it's hot. It's one of those Alabama nights. It's sticky. And it's hard to breathe. And I see the 2 kids, and they stand up. How y'all doing tonight? And they don't say anything. And they just start walking towards me. But much like meeting weird people, you meet a lot of rude people, too, delivering pizzas. So I walk around to the passenger side of the car, and I open up the door, and I reach inside to pull out their 2 2-liter drinks. And I turn around, and I go to hand it to the kid closest to me. And he's a tall black kid, and he's got kind of a mean mug on his face. And I go to hand him the drinks, and instead of taking the drinks from me, he reaches into the back waistband of his cargo shorts, and he pulls out a 9mm pistol. And he sticks it in my face. And I don't know if you can tell by my voice, I grew up around guns, surprise, surprise. And I can tell that this is a real gun. And not only can I tell that it's a real gun, the gun has a weight to it. And the way he's holding it, and I can feel the weight of it. And I think this gun is not only real, it is loaded. And I think, you are going to die. Because is the safety on that thing? If the safety's not on that thing, it probably has a hair trigger, and his finger may slip. And if his finger slips, it doesn't matter what kind of ammunition he has in it. From this range, you are going to die. And he says, give me everything. And I think, just stay calm. Just give him whatever he wants. He just wants the pizza and the money. And so I start to narrate all of my emotions aloud. So I say, there are your drinks. And I sit them down. And I turn to get the pizza, and I remember this television program I saw about thrill killings, about these teenagers who will lure someone out somewhere, and they'll kill them just to know what it feels like to kill somebody. And I think, what if it's that? What if these kids are just going to take all this stuff, and then they're just going to shoot me in the head, and I'm going to die for $35.04 worth of pizza? And even if he's not going to just shoot me in the head, maybe he's nervous, and maybe the safety's not on that gun, and he's going to pull the trigger accidentally, and from this distance, you are going to die. It's going to kill you. I go, there's the food. I put the food down on the ground. And I go to reach into my left pocket to pull out my bank to make change for pizzas. And I go to hand it to him, and he's breathing heavy. And I think, why is he breathing heavy? Is he breathing heavy because it's hot and it's hard to breathe and I'm having a hard time breathing? Or is he breathing heavy because he's nervous? And if he's nervous, the safety may not be on that gun, and he may accidentally pull the trigger, and he will blow your head off. Or maybe it's something else. Maybe he's breathing heavy because he's getting a kick out of this. Maybe this is a thrill killing, and he's going to know what it's like to kill someone in just a minute, and he's so excited, and he almost can't contain it, and he knows that he has me in a bad spot. I give him my money. I reach back to give him my wallet, and I start to hand it to him, and I think, the fuck does this kid need with my license? Why does this kid need my ID? And if he takes my ID, I'm just going to have to drive 3.5 hours north to go home to North Alabama, and I'm going to have to go to the DMV, and I'm going to have to get it replaced. And in that 3-hour drive home, I may get pulled over by a cop, and the cop's going to want to know why I don't have a driver's license, and I'm going to have to explain to him that this kid took my license, and he didn't really need my license. And I say, can I get my license out? And he looks at me, and he says, yeah. So my hand's shaking, and I pull my license out, and I hand him my wallet. And he goes, you got a cell phone? And for the first time, I hear panic and fear in my voice, and it's terrifying because I can't control it. And I say, no, man. That's everything I have. They don't allow us to carry cell phones. You can check my pockets. I'd hidden my cell phone in the console of the car. And he goes, go to the back of the car and lay down, and don't get up till I say you can. So for the first time, I have to actually turn my back to this kid. And I think, run. Just run out into the dark, because here's when he's going to shoot you. He's just telling you to turn around so he doesn't have to look you in the eye when he's killing you. And even if he's not planning on killing you, the safety may be off on that gun. And from this distance, he is most definitely going to blow your head off. But I think, no, you've been calm up until this point, and it's gotten you this far, so just go lay down. So I walk to the back of the car, and I go to lay down on the hot pavement where it's soaked up the sun all day, and I lay down in such a way where I can see their feet. And I think if either one of them takes even a step towards me, I'm bolting. I'm just going to run out into the dark because I'm not going to die on my belly for $35.04 worth of pizza. And I see their feet shuffling around, and I watch their sweaty legs, and I don't know if they're gathering up the pizza or they're counting the money or they're going through my wallet. I don't really know what they're doing. And then the kid says something that I will never, ever forget until the day I die. That's what you get for being late, motherfucker. And they run. And I watch their feet. And when they get to the split, they take a left. And I actually laid there for probably 10 seconds because I kept expecting to hear, okay, it's okay to get up now. Of course, that didn't happen. And so I think as quickly and as low to the ground as you can, you're going to get in your car and you're going to take a right. That way you don't have to see them anymore and you call 911. So that's what I do. I get up and I'm panicking, I'm freaking out. I call 911. And the lady, the dispatcher, tells me, sir, I need you to calm down and I need you to pull over. And I go, no, I'm not going to pull over. And I'm sorry that I'm not calm right now. I'm just freaking out. I just got robbed at gunpoint and it's dark and I want to get somewhere where there's light. And I'm going to drive to where there's light. And she goes, sir, I need you to pull over. And I go, I'm not going to pull over. I'm going to go to where there's light. I can see light ahead. And I pull up and I see the place of light and it's a funeral home. So I park in the funeral home and a patrol officer comes to pick me up and he's asking me questions and I say, can I call my mom? He says, yeah, call your mom. So I call my mom back in North Alabama and I tell her what's happened, and of course she's a worrywart like me. She starts freaking out and I tell her, don't worry, I'm fine. This is my last pizza delivery. I'm not gonna deliver any more pizzas. Don't worry about me. The next day she got my graduation invitations in the mail. So I have this recurring dream about it. And it's late at night. And it's hot. And I have this bad feeling that something terrible is going to happen. And the kid just shoots me in the face. And I see it from outside my body. And it doesn't look cinematic or interesting or cool. It just looks like my head exploding and springing leaks all at the same time. And then I'm in my body again. And I watch their feet run away, and I see the blood coming out of my head onto the pavement, and I think, why am I not dead? Why am I still conscious right now? And I think, oh, you still have blood in your brain. And when the blood's gone from your brain, you'll die. But then patrol officers show up, and I realize that this is not going to stop. And they close my eyes, but I can still see everything from the perspective of my dead body. And I watch my parents identify my body. I feel all the cuts as they're harvesting my organs for donation. And I feel the embalming fluid going through my veins. And I listen to my own funeral. And I hear my mom tell someone about the graduation invitations. And I keep hearing people say, why did this have to happen? It's so dumb. It's so dumb. There's no reason for this. And then they close the casket. It's darkness. And I think about that this is probably what hell is. Because all I can think about are my mistakes and my sins. I think about my mom, my dad, my younger sister Marley. I think about Charity, who's this big part of my life, and I hadn't even talked to her for 2 months before this. I thought about other girls that I had feelings for in my formative years. I thought about Allie in middle school and my friend Laura, who I had a crush on. And I think about how only the people who are arrogant enough to believe in the afterlife are the ones who are punished by it. And I think being an insignificant blip in the expanse of time followed by complete darkness, sleep, nothingness would be better than this. And I wake up and I'm panting and I'm crying. And one time I woke up screaming. And I think about it a lot, what people are saying at the funeral. They're saying, why? It's so dumb. This didn't have to happen. And I want to sit up in the casket and say, because it does. Just because it does. It's nobody's fault. It's no reason to blame anybody. It's just people die for insignificant reasons all the time. Why should I die for $35.04 worth of pizza? Why shouldn't I? I could have, but I'm glad that I didn't. Thank you.